just the market from open to close and beyond. Streaming 24/7, any screen, anywhere at schwabnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Fast Market on the Schwab Network. I'm Diane King Hall alongside Tom White in our Chicago studio. Time now for our cash tag segment. For that, we want to bring in our next guest. That's Andy Swan joining us with the latest sentiment data on Crocs. He's co-founder of LikeFolio. All right, Andy, so let's talk your latest data, especially in the context of we got to know from Piper Sandler. They're downgrading their view on this. And this is the company that does that taking stock with teen semi-annual survey. So earlier this year, they showed that Crocs was losing a little bit momentum with the teens, not a massive amount, but a little bit. My teen nephew still wears them. My son still wears them. He's not a teen yet. What is your data showing you?
Yeah, we think Piper got it right. And the teen survey is pretty much right on with the data that LikeFolio is showing. We're really showing that the premium brands, the kind of new cool brands like Hoka, UGG, and OnCloud are growing, while mainstream staples or the old cool like Nike, Converse, and Crocs are fading. And so we really see customer dollars chasing aspirational higher end shoes while the lower end gets ditched. And so, and when we zoom in, so that's the kind of the competitive landscape. There's a really it's kind of generational shift going on there. But when we zoom in on Crocs itself, or Crocs plus Hey Dude, web visits versus stock price kind of tells the same story. This is, not the peak of when we would normally see the highest demand for Crocs, but you can see just on a year-over-year basis, we're just kind of down and to the right in terms of web visits. That's the primary place where people do their research on what's the latest and greatest. There's just not a lot of consumer enthusiasm for this company anymore. They're losing the cool factor, and the consumer shifting to premium, and OnCloud and Hoka are right there to pick up the pieces. So we think Piper got the note right. We think they got the downgrade right, and it's going to take a little bit of effort, I think, for Crocs to win back and get itself back in that cool category.
Andy, if you look at this stock over the last maybe 5 or 6 years since about the pandemic, it's been a roller coaster due to the fact that we always talk about a lot of these brands, Andy, and they're cyclical as far as the popularity of them and maybe the partnerships. They had great partnerships a couple of years ago when the stock was rocking and rolling. Is that part of the reason that? And then you also have to look at the tariff impact, right?
Yeah, I think the tariff impact is huge. I think the one thing that LikeFolio does not have great insight into is the international market. So we don't exactly know what's going on there. I know the company needs international strength as part of its strategy, but I do think that the partnerships come and go. I also just think the consumer is cyclical. It's a tough business to be in when you constantly have to be ahead of a, basically teenage and young person driven market, because, as we all know, all three of us on here, parents, those opinions can change really rapidly and for very little reason. And so that's part of the game when you're an investor and an owner in a company like Crocs. I think one of the things the company is going to have to do is figure out a way to diversify its brand offerings and get a little bit larger portfolio. So something of theirs is always cool. That's what Nike was able to do for a very long time. But yeah, those are the challenges for Crocs, and they're not going away anytime soon.
That's a great perspective, Andy. And, one thing I would say, I get what you're saying about the older or considered older brands like Converse or, maybe even Nike, even though Nike's been certainly working on a turnaround here. But Crocs doesn't feel like an older brand. That feels like a young people brand, and like they had their moment during the pandemic that Tom mentioned, but they've managed to reinvent themselves different times, right? Comfort and the collabs that Tom just talked about. Is it just because of the fickle teenager, or is there potential? Are you seeing any interest in Crocs that could signal turnarounds or a regaining momentum story, I should say?
Yeah, we were really hoping to see that out of the Hey Dude brand. But we just haven't seen that materialize. And I think Crocs really bet a lot on that brand. They bet a lot internally on boosting that in terms of the kind of cool factor, and it just hasn't taken hold. Sometimes despite your best efforts and despite it, I think it's a good product, quantitatively. Our data shows that customers like the product. They like the Crocs product. So it's not a product issue as much as it is just a, kind of cool factor issue. And while Hoka and On Demand start taking up that mind space and that market share, it's just tough to compete. So I think one of the things Crocs has to do is just maintain its quality and maintain its brand positioning and wait for Hoka and On Demand to kind of fade off in terms of their cool factor and be ready to step in accordingly. So sometimes that's just the way it is. And it's not a great answer, for investors or for the company, but sometimes you just have to wait and be patient and then, make hay when the sun shines where you're at.
Andy, real quick here, they don't report earnings until October 30th on this one. If you guys had an earnings score now, would it be positive? I mean, we're sitting basically near levels that we haven't seen for a few years.
Yeah, it would be negative. We think that there's still downside to go here. The consumer is getting torn in a couple different directions. It's getting tougher and tougher to justify being in non-premium brands, and I wouldn't put Crocs or Hey Dude in that category. So, we think that there is more downside in the stock from here.
All right. Thank you, Andy. Great perspective there. One other thing I found interesting on your chart is the growth of Birkenstock. I was surprised to see that. So it's not just about comfort. That was Andy Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio. Now, for the trading perspective on all things Crocs, I want to kick it over to you, Tom, and Kevin Hinks.